Hey, folks, and welcome into episode 19 of the Longhorn Mailbag. Thanks for being here with us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. How about this, folks? Our true-false segments of the last three games, we are 15-0. Now, time for another pat on the back for your boy and for you guys for supporting us here on the channel. Thanks so much for being here. We're going to try to go 20-0 here to end the regular season off on a very high note. But nonetheless, the last 3 weeks, we've been on an absolute heater. So thanks for supporting us. Let's dive into this week's Texas Tech True False segment presented to us, as always, by our good friend Ranger's dad. Number one, Texas wins this game by 20 plus. I'm going true here. I think this feels like the game where Texas makes a statement at the end of the regular season heading into the Big 12 championship game. Frankly, I think to help their chances in the college football playoff, they could certainly use a statement. When you think about it, in the standings right now, you've got Florida State, who tragically lost their starting quarterback, Jordan Travis, to a horrific leg injury. We obviously hope that he's okay and hope the best for him. But without Travis at quarterback, now you question whether or not Florida State goes into the playoffs if they lose a game. They got Florida in rivalry week, and then in the ACC championship game, they've got Louisville. This Texas Tech game can serve to the committee as a bit of a conversation point or a comparison point with Oregon, the only one-loss team ahead of Texas right now. They played Texas Tech back in week 2, and they narrowly won that game against the Red Raiders in Lubbock. I believe it was only a one-score game. So this is a chance for Texas to kind of flex their muscles a little bit on their home turf in the last game of the season. I think they find a way to put it together offensively. They've had success against Texas Tech in the past, didn't have it as much last year in the overtime loss in Lubbock, but they beat them 70-35 a year prior in Austin. I think they have a similar, maybe not as high scoring, but similar performance on Saturday. Number 2, Texas has 500-plus yards of total offense. Well, if they're going to win by 20-plus, I would hope they have 500 total yards of offense. So I'm going true there. Even in a struggling effort last season, they put up 34 points, but it took them to overtime to get there, and they had a lot of struggles offensively and turned the ball over a few times. They were still almost to that 500-yard mark. Steve Sarkisian's done a good job of getting his offense there. They're averaging well over 400 yards a game. I believe they're in the top 15 in total offense right now. So I'm going true there back-to-back. Number 3, the defense forces 2 turnovers. I'm going true here as well. Texas Tech is tied for 112th amongst FBS teams in turnover ratio. They're at -6 this year. So I think the Longhorns are able to get 2, and I think that's a big factor in them winning this ball game. Number 4, a Texas wide receiver will have 2 touchdowns. I'm going true here. This is a little bit of a gamble for me. I was going back and forth really down to the wire on this. It's only happened twice this year, and both times it's been A.D. Mitchell. But I think Texas wins this game big, and they'll be able to get it to a guy 2 times in the end zone. Maybe it is Adonai Mitchell again for a 2-touchdown performance. Maybe Xavier Worthy has a really big game. If it really is if it's not one of those 2 guys, I'm looking at Jatavian Sanders having a big game at DKR, and what will most likely be, if he goes to the NFL draft, his final game at DKR Memorial Texas Stadium. So I'm looking at one of those 3 guys to have 2 touchdowns through the air for Texas. Number 5, Cedric Baxter will reach the century mark, 100 yards rushing on the ground. I'm going true here as well. So we're taking a big risk here on my 15-0 run the past 3 weeks. We're going all true in this game for the Longhorns, but I do think that they're going to be able to put on a show and really flex their muscles going into the Big 12 championship game, assuming they win. Of course, if they lose, there's a whole bunch of different scenarios that the Big 12 revealed earlier this week that still are very confusing, but you can go read up on those from their release earlier. But Baxter proved to us last week that he can be a reliable running back in place of Jonathan Brooks, because he went for 117 on the Big 12's toughest defense. They were ranked number 1 ahead of Texas going into that game. So, when you go for 117 yards in your first, I would say your first true healthy start, he was a little bit banged up in those first 2 games of the season, and that's why Jonathan Brooks took the reins over from him. You look at that as a very positive aspect, and I think you carry that on going forward. So I'm going true here. So 5 trues here in this Texas Tech game on a short week for Texas, the day after Thanksgiving. We'll see if we can go to 20-0. I certainly hope so. All right, we're diving into questions now. We've got three, so we'll keep them a little bit faster. Our first one from our guy, Jeff Howe. With 10 regular season wins, has Texas already met your 2023 expectations, or is there more work to be done to get there? So, way back in episode 5 of the Longhorn Mailbag, if you've been with us ever since about 2 months ago, I said my definition of success for Texas this season would be either a Big 12 championship game berth, but more than likely a Big 12 championship victory. Winning the Big 12 conference should be the goal for Texas this year. And I think that stayed the course throughout the season based on what we've seen. You beat Alabama by 10 on the road. You lose a tough one to Oklahoma, but you're still hanging in there, and you win close games. Texas wasn't able to win close games the last 2 years, even if the Big 12 has had a little bit of an odd year where teams show up against Texas and then lose games where you kind of just scratch your head and think, well, why wasn't Texas able to do what they just did the following Saturday? Big 12 title should definitely still be the expectation in my book. And they can clinch a trip to Arlington with a win on Friday. If they win that, if they win the Big 12 championship, I would say they're right there where the expectations should be this season. They've met the expectations at that point. Now, there's a good chance, not a guarantee, but a pretty good chance that if they win out and win the Big 12 championship game, they have a good shot at the college football playoff. If they even make it to a semifinal game, forget what happens in the game. If they make it there, I would say that is exceeding expectations in year 3 under Steve Sarkisian. So that's how I look at it as we head into the final week of the regular season. All right, next up from Bevo. Does having 10 wins change anything for any recruits or potential transfers? And looking at the next step, would making the Big 12 championship game change anything with recruiting and or transfers? Well, I don't have any inside intel on that, but if you want inside intel, you can go to make sure to read our recruiting stuff from our good friends Hank South and Jordan Scruggs over on the horns247.com board. But what I can tell you is generally winning helps in recruiting. I think it's a very easy strategy, but it really is going to help you. So making a Big 12 championship game is going to help Texas in recruiting because it shows, recruits and transfers that they can win at Texas. And it's going to especially help in the positions of need. Just off the top of my head, when you go to next season, you've got safety is going to be a position of need. You've got wide receiver is going to be a position of need with the talent they're losing. They still have a lot of talent on the roster, and they're going to bring in good talent from the high school ranks, but you probably want one more transfer portal wide receiver as a more reliable, experienced guy. And the defensive line, when you've got Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy leaving, those are all spots where you're going to want to see, somebody step in either from the high school ranks or the transfer portal ranks. And so if you're a player at those positions watching Texas and they keep on winning, you see yourself in that role and help them continue to win. So that's a great recruiting pitch. And then obviously Texas is absolutely at the forefront of the NIL market in college football. So that's going to be a huge help for the Longhorns as well. All right, and last but not least from eWeb. Second question in a row is for eWeb in the mailbag. At this point in time, who are the offensive and defensive MVPs for Texas? So this list could change in the last couple of games here for the Longhorns, but offensively, I'm going Adonai Mitchell for this season. Texas needed to lift some weight off of Xavier Worthy's shoulders coming into this year. He was basically the main target every game with a broken hand for half the season. And, Texas was almost throwing him the ball too much, expecting him to do too much. So in the transfer portal, they go and get Adonai Mitchell, a guy who had performed really well in the college football playoff for Georgia, but hadn't really stayed healthy throughout his career. Well, now he stays healthy, and that's made all the difference for Texas and for Mitchell. He leads the team in touchdown receptions with 9 of them. And while Worthy hasn't gotten into the end zone as much, it's certainly lifted that weight off his shoulders, and he's been extremely efficient. Still has 4 touchdowns, but he leads this team in receiving yards. So it's not like Xavier Worthy's production has dropped off. It just looks a little bit different. And Adonai Mitchell, as our guy Hank South likes to call him, Adonai the touchdown guy, is scoring touchdowns, and that's what Texas needed to get that weight off Xavier Worthy's shoulders, but still keep that production level the same. I think they've done that so far, and it's a big part of Mitchell's contribution. And then defensively, this is a very easy pick. The guy who should be the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, and it's Tavondre Sweat. If he wins the conference Defensive Player of the Year, then he should be the Defensive Player of the Year for the Texas team. So absolute force in the middle of the defense, but I don't have to tell you that. He's extremely good against the run. That's why he's going to be should be a first-round pick, in my opinion. And he plugs up the run really well. But one thing that I've tried to harp on the past week or so is that he doesn't get enough credit. He and Byron Murphy really don't get enough credit for the amount of disruption that they cause in the passing game. We saw it in the TCU game, and we saw it last week against Iowa State as well. These two get into the backfield. They may not put up the sacks all the time, but they put pressure on the quarterback, and that's very important for Texas, especially when the secondary has been struggling the way that they have in the last few weeks. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Longhorn Mailbag. I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. As always, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you are the first to know when new content heads your way. For the rest of the crew, I'm Tommy Yarsh. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.